The principal's voice trembled as she told 911 operators, "We have a possible contamination situation." Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from. Meanwhile, a small girl stood quietly in the drop-off lane, her hazmat suit hanging awkwardly from her shoulders. Through the fogged visor, she looked around, puzzled by the wide-eyed stares and nervous whispers. In her mind, she hadn't worn something frightening. This was her special outfit to stay clean for messy day at school. What no one around her could have guessed was how a simple decision at home had led to this moment. The answer began with a father at his kitchen table. That morning began in the kitchen with a quiet routine. A cup of coffee sat cooling on the table, and next to it lay a short school note about dressing children for messy activities later in the week. The father skimmed the sentence, his mind catching on the words about clothes that could handle spills. He thought back to last year, when a simple paint activity had left his daughter in tears. She hated the feeling of sticky stains, hated seeing her favorite dress ruined. For him, the memory still sat heavy. This time, he wanted to avoid a repeat. His goal was simple: keep her clean, keep her calm, and spare her the hurt of standing out for the wrong reason. In the garage, something caught his eye. An old hazmat suit from a workplace safety exercise hung folded in a corner. To him, the thick protective material looked like the perfect answer to a school day built around slime, paint, and chaos. Where others might see overreaction, he saw reassurance. He picked it up, already picturing her smiling instead of crying. He carried the bundle inside, holding it out as if it were a surprise gift. "Look what Daddy found for your special day," he said. She stared at the strange outfit with a mixture of wonder and doubt, but his excitement made her trust the idea. The oversized sleeves and legs dragged along the floor as he helped her step in. The zipper ran up with a sharp sound, sealing her inside. Her breathing fogged the clear visor, making her giggle, and the suit gave off a soft rustle each time she moved. "Now you won't have to worry about messes anymore," he told her, smoothing the bulk around her shoulders. She wiggled with amusement at the odd, armor-like outfit. On the drive to school, she tapped the visor with her fingertips, charmed by how differently the world looked through its plastic sheen. Her father watched from the rearview mirror, proud and relieved that he had solved the problem in his own way. He saw protection, not provocation. And as the car rolled into the school's drop-off lane, that quiet choice was about to meet the gaze of a larger world. The car door swung open, and a small figure stepped out in full protective gear. The white suit swallowed her shoulders, the clear shield on her helmet catching the morning sun. She looked less like a child and more like a small statue in a coat too large, standing still as the world stared back. Parents in the drop-off line stopped mid-sentence, their everyday chatter thinned to silence as expressions shifted from casual to concerned. Children pressed their faces against car windows, pointing with wide eyes at the unusual arrival. Even the crossing guard paused with her sign half raised. The bright smile she wore each morning dimmed as the little girl shuffled forward, her oversized boots scuffing against concrete. She lifted a gloved hand in a gentle wave toward her father's retreating car, unaware of the hush that followed her steps. Inside the office, the secretary noticed from her window. Her heart skipped as she remembered recent safety training, the section about spotting unusual attire and reporting potential hazards. Her hand hovered for a moment, then went to the intercom to alert the principal. Moments later, the principal came into view just as the child reached the front steps. Against a backdrop of streamers and cheerful posters welcoming students, the bulky white suit looked unmistakably serious. Adults nearby instinctively moved children back toward classrooms. One teacher even placed herself between her doorway and the suited figure, her tone calm, though her body stood stiff with protective instinct. The wind tugged at the loose fabric, giving it movement that seemed larger than the girl herself. Through the fogging visor, she blinked and tried to make out why no one had greeted her yet. She couldn't hear the whispers, only saw lips moving around her. Her own concerns stayed simple. Would the suit let her play at the slime table? She shuffled again, the crinkle of material loud in the otherwise quiet courtyard. At the doorway, the principal's hand twitched toward the emergency line, her practiced habits urging quick action, even as a quieter part of her hesitated. And in that pause, the weight of what to do next shifted squarely onto her shoulders. The principal's focus shifted instantly when the secretary appeared in her doorway, breath unsteady and eyes wide. The hurried words about a child arriving in professional-looking protective gear hit like a jolt. Papers on her desk no longer mattered. She rose at once and stepped to the window. Outside, the sight stopped her cold. A small figure stood wrapped in stiff white material, the face shield glinting hard in the morning light. Training sessions she had practiced over and over came back to her now. How to recognize unusual threats. How to protect those in her care. The outfit seemed far too genuine to be a costume. Her mind leapt quickly. A chemical risk at home? Perhaps an illness? Maybe something more deliberate. The thought wasn't about herself, but about everyone in the building. Dozens of children, each one trusted to her care, sat only steps away. Duty whispered with clarity. Isolate the student, call for help, follow procedure. Yet another voice lingered, quieter but insistent. This was still a child, standing calmly, not coughing or stumbling, not showing signs of distress. Could something harmless have been misunderstood? The two thoughts pulled against each other with equal weight. Her hand reached for the emergency phone. The plastic felt suddenly heavy against her palm as if the choice itself had weight. She pressed 3 numbers, steadying her breathing as the dial tone clicked through. When the operator answered, her voice came out careful, firm. We have a possible contamination situation. The words filled the office in the same calm, clipped tone she had practiced before but never thought she would use in real life. She kept her eyes on the figure by the steps, every second stretching long as she waited, hoping the judgment she'd just made would not unravel further. What she couldn't yet know was how far that single call would carry. Because once the line connected, the next chain of events no longer belonged to her. It belonged to the systems designed to respond. Systems already moving into motion beyond the school walls. Sirens broke the morning stillness, echoing across the neighborhood. The call had prompted an emergency response. Fire, ambulance, and police units pressed toward the school. Their flashing lights painted the brick walls in bands of red and blue, stretching across windows like a warning banner. Inside, teachers moved through hallways with deliberate calm. They guided students into classrooms, lowered blinds, and handed out worksheets with steady voices meant to reassure. Beneath that composure, their hands shook faintly, the weight of responsibility pressing harder than the lesson plans laid before them. Outside, the little girl stood at the center of the empty courtyard. Adults gathered well beyond her reach, their figures blurred through the fogged surface of her clear shield. She tilted her head as the vehicles rolled in, more curious than frightened. To her, the suit still felt like protection, not a cause for alarm. Responders stepped out wearing their own protective gear. Tanks and sealed gloves gave their movements a sharp contrast to her oversized costume, making them appear like a second wall closing in. Yellow tape went up around the playground, the bright strips fluttering in the breeze as if to underline danger no one had explained. Around the block, neighbors began drifting to the fence line. They spoke in low tones, watching the flashing lights reflect across school windows. The sight pulled at their instincts to protect, and yet the details remained unclear. Parents who received district alerts stared at their phones, scrolling messages for clues as their worry spread into rumor. If this part resonates with you, leave a comment. It helps others feel seen. The scale of the response took on its own momentum. Safety systems are designed to protect, but in rare moments, A misunderstood image can be enough to unleash a full-scale reaction. One protocol reinforces the next, and the chain is difficult to slow. And yet, at the center of all this movement, the child stood still. Through her visor, she watched the shapes around her shift and pull back. What seemed to heavy-hearted adults like risk and protocol was something else entirely through her eyes. That world was about to be revealed. The little girl shifted her weight inside the bulky suit, surprised that none of the teachers had come over to welcome her. Her breath clouded the clear plastic shield, turning the world outside into a soft blur. Beyond the haze, she saw adults moving quickly, their faces set in serious expressions. Their mouths opened and closed as if exchanging important words. But nothing reached her through the layers of fabric and plastic. She thought back to her father's cheerful voice that morning as he zipped her inside the outfit. He had promised it would keep her clean for the paint and slime stations. Remembering that, she tried to feel reassured, yet when she looked again, she saw adults keeping their distance and watching her with eyes that reminded her of the way her mother stared at the news during storm warnings. Other children pressed against the classroom windows, trying to wave. Teachers gently drew them back, leaving only faint handprints on the glass. The suit that had seemed like a shield now made her feel stood apart. When she moved, the material gave off one sharp crinkle, the only sound in a courtyard too quiet for recess. She wondered if she had broken a rule. Maybe special clothes weren't actually allowed, even for messy day. Maybe she should have worn old jeans, like everyone else. The thought pressed down on her until her lip trembled inside the visor. Yet she clung to one steady hope. Would she still get the chance to play with the slime? She pictured dipping her gloved hands into the colored goo, the suit keeping her clean, just as her dad had promised. Across the courtyard, emergency workers in their own protective gear moved toward her. To her, they looked like grown-up versions of herself, like teammates arriving for a bigger game. She wondered if they, too, were dressed for messy activities, maybe even better ones than her class had prepared. That thought made her stand patiently, waiting for someone to explain when the fun would begin. But the adults nearby didn't see a game. Their fear was plain in every step backward and every hurried call. She was caught between two worlds, her bright expectation and their dark caution. How long would it take before someone finally explained what was really happening? The father was unloading groceries when his phone buzzed. The school's number lit up on the screen. He answered quickly, but the principal's voice was tight, every word heavy. She told him there was an emergency situation involving his daughter. For an instant, his thoughts shot to accidents, to sudden illness, his grip tightening on a bag of apples. "Is she hurt?" he asked, already breathless. The principal assured him she appeared physically fine, but then described the scene at school. Protective gear, alarm, emergency vehicles. The words hazmat suit and response came through the line like a blow. In one rush of recognition, it fell into place. His mind went back to the newsletter, the phrase about dressing for messy day. His shoulders slumped as truth replaced confusion. What had felt like a clever solution in the morning now read like a threat under brighter scrutiny. His protective instinct felt foolish. He could still see her small face peering up at him as he pulled the zipper to her chin, trusting him completely, believing this costume of safety was meant for fun. That memory twisted inside as the principal described the fear surrounding her now. The bag of apples thudded onto the counter, one spilling free and rolling out of sight. He didn't look back. His hand closed on his keys. The phone clutched to his ear as he hurried toward the door. He called his wife from the car, his voice tumbling with apology and halting explanations. She sat silent on the other end, her pause sharper than words could be. The short drive to school suddenly felt stretched, long, and punishing. Each stoplight, each empty minute brought new images from the morning. The thick fabric, the sealed visor, the crimp of gloves over wrists. Through new eyes, he saw what others must have seen, an image too close to professional protection to ever feel playful. His literal reading of the note had spiraled into this. He pressed the accelerator harder, leaning forward without realizing it. Every block carried him closer to his daughter, closer to the crowded scene his mistake had stirred. He drove toward the school, knowing every minute made the misunderstanding worse. He stopped just beyond the yellow tape and stepped out into a scene of flashing lights and tense voices. Emergency crews stood ready, their attention fixed on the small, suited figure near the playground. His daughter stood quietly, still sealed inside the white material that had caused so much alarm. She had not spotted him yet. The father moved quickly toward the nearest officer, his hands raised in plain view. His words burst out in a rush. An apology, an explanation, the school newsletter, his little girl's dislike of sticky paints. Spilled out under the glare of emergency lights and uniforms, the reasoning sounded smaller, almost fragile, yet it carried the truth the responders needed. From the school doors, the principal appeared. Her face was pale, her arms crossed tight as she listened. She studied him for a long moment, letting the pieces rearrange in her mind. Her eyes shifted toward the child, and then back again. The hard lines in her expression eased slightly, though her voice stayed measured. And then the girl saw him. "Daddy!" she called, pushing her arms forward in a waddling run. For a moment, responders stiffened, uncertain if they should step in. But the father dropped to one knee, bracing himself as she threw herself against him. His arms closed around her, the stiff material crinkling between them like paper being folded. The tightness hanging over the scene gave way in that sound, replaced by simple relief. He worked the zipper down slowly, careful not to catch on her shirt. She laughed as cool air rushed in. "I stayed clean, just like you said," she reminded him, her words muffled against his shoulder. The principal watched, her professional guard softening into quiet understanding. She nodded as if recognizing how easily vague language and a parent's care had collided. Emergency crews began to lower their guard. The tape fluttered loose. Gear was packed away in practiced silence. A few exchanged glances that mixed relief with weary surprise. Inside, blinds lifted, and classrooms stirred back to normal rhythm. Holding her father's hand, the girl glanced toward her classmates, still eager for her turn at the messy activities. The father gently lifted the visor from her face. Her eyes blinked against the light, free now from the fogged shield. That image lingered, even as the school community braced itself to reflect on what this day had revealed about the ways they communicated. By the following week, staff and families were already speaking openly about what had unfolded. The focus turned to lessons in communication, where small gaps had widened into something much larger. Around the conference table, the school's leadership spread out copies of the original newsletter. The once playful phrase, "dress for getting messy," no longer felt harmless. They quickly agreed that future notes needed more clarity. Instead of broad wording, examples would be printed right in the text. Old t-shirts and waterproof smocks. And teachers would follow those notes with simple reminders in class, saying aloud what worked best, so children and parents shared the same picture. The discussion didn't stop at newsletters. Staff asked what would help in the moment if something unusual happened again. Out of that came a short checklist, 2 questions anyone could quietly ask before escalating. Is the child showing signs of illness or distress? And could this have an innocent explanation? Those questions, they realized, created a moment of pause. And pauses matter. Misunderstandings are like brittle ornaments. They can shatter quickly. But if handled with care, they can be lifted and set safely back in place. For the father, the lesson was personal. His urge to protect his daughter had not changed, But he now saw how others could misread his decisions. He began asking clarifying questions instead of assuming he understood. And when instructions came home, he weighed them not only as a parent, but as part of a wider community. The principal carried a quieter insight. Safety training would remain important, but she recognized that slowing down, just long enough to consider an innocent possibility, could keep fear from racing ahead of facts. That adjustment found its way into staff practice, not as a rule book, but as a shared habit. Neighbors kept the story alive in lighter tones. The phrase, "pulling a hazmat," slipped into jokes about over-preparing. But underneath the laughter was a reminder about how quickly signals get crossed. At home, the suit itself stayed tucked away in the garage. It became a single, silent reminder. Clear speaking and careful listening protect better than any costume could. And from those lessons, another truth stood out. How easily protective instincts, mixed with small communication gaps, can lead to far bigger consequences. In the end, the heart of the story is simple. A well-meaning choice can look very different from another person's point of view. Taking a moment to pause, ask calm questions, and share clear words can stop fear from running ahead of facts. Have you experienced similar misunderstandings between home and school? Share your stories in the comments. These moments help us all learn. If you want more stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Enjoy the story.